There was a time when women were just sold off. We were another form of kind of like property, especially for your fathers and everything. It wasn't that they had conversations with these men and they had the best intentions in mind for you.
You brought up India. India alone, without bringing any of the other countries you mentioned, is 20% of the human population. So if there's something happening to 20% of women on this planet, I am concerned.
But you are speaking as if this is just the norm. When we're talking in general. You think in general, most men, when they had a daughter, they just gave her off and was like, yeah, get the F out of here. Men throughout history have had access to women. Brothels, prostitutes have existed in all time. There are hoes in all decades, eras. There has always been access to women. I mean, a man can get off on a woman anywhere. I don't think that's the case when you're talking about access to women. You have to when a man gets married, he's not just having her and then you just bang her and then you just go off to work. He has to take care of her, clothe her, house her. I mean, this wasn't something for free. This is a man taking on a full responsibility of another person. Why is it seen as like, oh, this is access to a woman? He wouldn't need to do all this stuff. This is another burden for him to bring on a woman. Now you have to have something else you have to protect. I mean, I don't understand how that's seen as a access to women. All right, I don't. All right, I've talked enough. You guys can go. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was agreeing with Ameera in regards to the role that a paternal figure would think about in regards to being there for their kid. And I'm basing what somebody might not like, what Ty says is unrealistic, off of my understanding about how I operate and how I view what I would want for my children, and how my grandfather had conversation with my father about how the family would get involved if something was to go wrong within a relationship, and about the general role of men as protectors. I'm not saying we've been perfect and nothing ever happened I'm saying the majority of us did not condone abuse of any kind, and we would step in to assist. That's a thing. Like I know the color purple painted black men to be these abusers who got drunk and had kids everywhere and left them, but that's not the majority of black men. Small minority who do act like that may have had multiple women they did this shit to, but I don't think the majority of black men operate.
Marcus, y'all keep talking about today and within our time period and our parents' time period. I thought we were talking about historically. Over all the time of human being existence and women being around. That's what I'm referencing. There was a time when women were just sold off. We were another form of kind of like property, especially for your fathers and everything. It wasn't that they had conversations with these men and they had the best intentions in mind for your well-being. It was about how they could capitalize off of having this little girl, because that's all you could do with the little girl at that time is capitalize. You can't continue the lineage. You're not going to be the next king. So I have to marry you off to someone that it makes sense to marry you off to. It doesn't matter if he's a good person. We're building something larger from here. It's really not about how you feel. That's what I was talking about. I'm not talking about nowadays. That's why I said now, as we've gone further in history, that may be the mindset of men, right? Because the whole idea of marriage has changed and morphed. It's transition. So now we're not worried about necessarily what business acquisitions I can make to make the best lineage for my family. Now we're morphing it down more to how you treat her. Is this going to be best for her? Now I have to protect her, right? It's changed over time, but I was talking about historically. You guys keep talking about your personal experiences. I've never experienced it either personally, but
right.
Thank you.
Ty, when I think about historically, it's only been a smaller margin of wealth.
One second.
Go ahead.
So I just want to quickly kind of clarify, because when I was listening to Ameera speak, she said, I don't know where you guys are from, but this doesn't happen where I'm from. And when we're speaking about history, it's important to understand that we're speaking about the globe. We're not speaking about where you're from. We're not speaking about where I'm from. We're speaking about the globe. And there's some of us that can remove ourselves from being myopic, and we can think about the macro, and we can say, hey, this might not be my experience, but this is somebody else's experience. You brought up India. India alone, without bringing any of the other countries you mentioned, is 20% of the human population. So if there's something happening to 20% of women on this planet, I am concerned. I am concerned. It doesn't have to happen to me for me to be concerned. That's what empathy is. So when we're having conversations, I would hope we're not all getting on here to say, well, my experience is that I went through. No, I would hope that we're not doing that. I would hope that we are getting on here to speak about the general. And the general is that women have been harmed via arranged marriages across history and time and centuries and millennia, meaning when women are sold and bartered for land and lineage and wealth that is not considering the humanity in that person. And if you're going to bring up India, like, which is, it's an example, sure, that's a large percent of the population. So if you're saying that, I don't know where y'all are from, and then you brought up India, these are mostly Black people on this call. So most of us are from here, right? But we're speaking about a global experience and a historical experience. So I understand you might be getting a little bit bored, but I just want to kind of make that distinction that none of us are speaking about our uncles, our fathers. I would hope like we're speaking about the general consensus.
I mean, what I've seen is that there's movies in America, like there's a whole channel on TV dedicated to making women victims and men just these horrible abusers. My statement is based on the nature of men. Most men, when they have a daughter, they are very protective, territorial. They're not just going to give off their little baby girl. I mean, you already know, daddies and daughters, mothers and sons. There's always a different bond between the two. There's a very special bond between daddy and daughter. Most fathers are not going to drop off their daughters and be like, yeah, get the F out of here. You're just useless. You're wasteless. This has happened, but you are speaking as if this is just the norm. When we're talking in general. You think in general, most men, when they had a daughter, they just gave her off and was like, yeah, get the F out of here. I'm going to barter you for 10 cows and some land. So let's talk in general.
Historically, Amari, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that has happened.
Marriage didn't protect women. It protected men's access to them. It was a contract of control. It was disguised as commitment. She became property. He became respectable. Love was the cover story, but ownership was the business. I mean, I call balls and strikes. Facts are facts, right? If you were out historically, because we're speaking historically, we're not talking about right now. Is that correct? Or are we talking about then and now? Because we're talking historically. If a man was successful, but he did not have a proper wife, he had a lower standing in society. So it was beneficial to a man, especially a man who was supposed to be upwardly mobile, to be married. Having said that, women got protection, they got provision, they got access to capital, they got access to a name. This was a time period very different than the time period we currently live in, where now it's about more playing for your first name and everybody plays an individual game, where then everybody played for whoever the last name was. That's why to this day you see last names on people's jersey. You don't see people calling themselves Michelle Nicole, going back 60 years ago. We've got to get ourselves to a point where we understand that there is a mutual benefit to having strong family structure. One of the main reasons that the Black community is in such disarray is because we do not have a traditional family structure. So it's a mutual beneficial symbiotic relationship, but absolutely it gives as good as it gets.
So I had to write some stuff down because it was going for a long time. So I just, despite like the modernization and everything, I just think the human species is made for a man to be with a woman. I think that partnerships create success. And I just don't think that we are made to be isolated. Like nobody's made to, that's just my take on it. I think that two halves create a whole. And if one is weak, then the other one is stronger. And as far as like the history conversation, I think that is the loaded question. And I just think it depends on who and what people you are talking about. because I believe that throughout history there were people who bartered their women and did things, but there were also kings and queens that never did that. There were kings and queens that actually loved their children and they loved their family and they didn't feel the need to sell people out. So I think that sometimes we focus on negatives and you have to put things in perspective. It can't all be one-sided. I think that currently now, if we're talking about in today's time, I would agree with M. White by saying that, hey, historically in Black American families back in the day, like you had to meet her dad, like there was a vouching process before you got married. So if we're talking in modern days, as far as like Black Americans, historically, you had to be vouched for. People weren't just giving away their daughters. And so it's like, that didn't really happen in our culture. So if we're talking about historically, I think that it happened on both ends. I think that some of the marriages were decent and then some of them were horrible. And that's just the way it goes. But Ameera, we're not from your country, so we don't, that's just not something that we do here. So I think that it's hard for people to grasp that concept.